Is your HOA always this fair? At dawn, by my driveway, our fence came up. Gate creak yellow. Notice flapping. They called it compliance, blocked my line, mocked my deed clipboard in a SUV window. Deputy shrugged, bolts bagged as evidence. We pulled the plat and retirement roll. HATR 12-07 isn't filed permit copies, stamped paper. Stamp thuds, porch light flicks as the bank reviews the loan. Next week, by sunset, funds froze, and the clubhouse went quiet anyway, gavel next. We'll read it into record. The sound of metal on wood broke the stillness of dawn. I stepped outside with a thermos, half expecting a stray animal at the fence. Instead, 2 men in HOA vests were loosening the bolts on my corner post. Mist clung low over the pasture, turning every breath into smoke. A yellow notice flapped against the wire like a warning flag. Filed. 312-07. Received. 03-17. Morning, the taller one said, without looking up. Compliance correction. Whose compliance board authorization, he answered, tightening his grip on the wrench. That post sits on my deeded line. Sir, we're instructed. By who? He nodded toward the cul-de-sac where a white SUV idled with its headlights dimmed. A clipboard glinted in the window. Ellie came to my side phone already raised. Dad, I'm recording. Good, I said quietly. Get their names. The short one tapped his badge. Work order covers it. Read it to me. He hesitated, then passed me a laminated sheet. Encroachment within HOA buffer, he muttered. I held the page to the light. Parcel IDs retired. Sir, cancelled in '89. You're standing past the subdivision plat. The wrench froze mid-turn. Gravel settled. Even the birds went still. From across the street a neighbor lifted his phone. So you were warned. I unfolded my old deed, the notary stamp half faded but still clear. Warned, no, I said. Taxed, yes. Keep filming, I told Ellie. I've got their plates, she said. Timestamp, too. The SUV window cracked another inch. Gentlemen, proceed, a voice ordered. Metal shrieked. The post came up from the earth roots dangling. Dirt fell in dull clumps like someone emptying a pocket. I breathed through my teeth. You signed for this? I asked the SUV. The window lowered. A young staffer leaned out. Please direct questions to the board. Which board? Clearbrook Meadows HOA. Name on the vote. Sir, I'm not authorized to, right? I said. Neither is this order, Ellie whispered. We should bag the hardware. Do it. We watched the rail slide free, leaving a raw gap in the skyline. The taller man wiped his forehead. We don't pick sides. You literally picked up my side. He didn't answer. A county deputy rolled up, lights off. Civil issue, he said before I could ask. Good, I replied. Civil means paper. You can file a dispute. I will. Give me the report number. He handed me a card and backed away like he'd stepped on glass. The last staple came loose. The post dropped into the bed of their truck. Ellie sealed the bolts in a plastic bag and labeled it NW Corner 0331. The staffer stepped out again and placed an envelope at my boots. Hearing today, 5:30. Perfect. Clubhouse, he added. Even better. He retreated as if the driveway might bite. Lane's pickup rumbled down the county road, dust curling behind it. What am I looking at? A counting problem, I said. You want tools, number, cameras. He grinned. Thought so. We stopped at the mailbox. The flag was down, tire marks still fresh. I took photos from the same angles the assessor used last spring. Ellie read aloud into her mic. Notice HATR 12-07 encroachment within Buffer Enforcement Unit 2. Say the time, 0339. We stood there in the thin quiet. The space where the fence had been looked like a pulled tooth. On the porch, I spread the papers, deed plat, tax receipts, an old survey photo with my father leaning on that same corner post. The coffee tasted like burnt walnut. Ellie watched me. Dad, do we post this? Not yet. First, we file. County clerk, as soon as they open. At the post office board, a new flyer was stapled over the old community calendar, HOA Community Safety Initiative. Someone had scribbled beneath it, "Show the plat." A man in golf shoes passed by. "Trucks dust kids," he said. "You know, I know boundaries," I answered. He shrugged and kept walking. The diner smelled like bacon grease and coffee grounds. Lane slid into the booth across from us. "Coffee," he told the waitress, "and whatever makes a man useful." She nodded toward the notice sleeve. "They're really doing it, huh?" "Doing what I asked. Deciding for people." She topped my mug until it nearly overflowed. "You want me to print their meeting agenda? My niece works there." "Please," I said. Once the clerk's office opened, I called. The fluorescent hum on the line was loud enough to feel. "I need the 1974 subdivision plat," I said. "Name, Cole Carter. Reason, boundary dispute." "Received," she said, stamping the page. "We open at 9. By the time the sun cleared the trees, I'd decided they wanted me to tire out before sunset. But they'd underestimated how long a man can stand when he's right. Ellie looked at me from the truck seat, her phone still recording. "We're not losing this," she said. "No," I answered. "We're not." The wind whistled through the bare posts, high and thin, the sound of something taken that wasn't gone for good. The copier beeped a sharp little pulse that cut through the murmur of the records office. Ellie slid the gray sleeve across the counter. The clerk lifted the plat with 2 fingers and fed it to the scanner. The window stamp hammered down. "Received, Euro 9-11. "Name again," the clerk asked. "Cole Carter," I said. "Parcel 18, original plat. We're checking boundaries against a newer HOA notice." She peered over her glasses. "You brought the notice," Ellie held up the sleeve. "Filed 4/1/12/07, she said. "And a work order that cites an encroachment within buffer." The clerk sniffed amused in a polite way. "Buffers are only holy when they exist on the map," she typed. The fluorescent hum filled the silence. "All right, I've got the 1974 subdivision plat, the 1989 parcel roll, and the 2004 re-index. Show me the roll," I said. She pivoted the monitor. A column of numbers flicked by, then stopped on a pink highlight. "Parcel ID retired, 1989. "Right there," I said. Ellie leaned in. "So the notice quotes an ID that doesn't legally exist." "Not since I was your age," the clerk said. "If they're using that to anchor jurisdiction, it's like nailing a sign to fog." I breathed once, deep and slow. "Print the plat and the roll. Seal both." She reached for the stamp. The plot and light swept across the page like a quiet lighthouse. $2 a page, she said. "Worth 10, I answered. We stepped to a narrow table under a humming vent. Ellie laid the fresh copies flat and smoothed the corners with her palm. "Overlay?" she asked. I nodded. She took a clear acetate from her bag. Ellie carries supplies like other people carry gum, and taped the corners to the plat. "Corner post here," she said, dotting the northwest point with a blue pen. "Subdivision line here. A second dot south and east. Your fence line runs the deeded boundary. Their buffer stops 71 feet shy." Lane leaned against the doorframe, pretending to read a notice about juror parking. "How bad is it?" he asked. Ellie handed him the acetate. "Bad for them. Good for us." The clerk returned with an envelope and a red ink stamp. "Certified copy," she said. "And because I'm old-fashioned, here's a paper receipt." I slid it into the folder. "Ma'am," I said, "what's your name?" "In case the board asks who pulled this." "Brenda," she said. "If the board calls, tell them the file cabinet doesn't vote." Outside, the morning smelled like disinfectant and wet concrete. The courthouse steps still glistened from the janitor's mop. Ellie tucked the plat tube under her arm like a baton. We crossed to the diner, because that's where people in this county go when they want company and coffee strong enough to stand up to a bad idea. We took the corner booth. The waitress set down mugs without asking. "Agenda's printing," she said. Niece texted me the link. Lane unfolded the county paper. On the front page, a cropped photo from last week's rodeo. On page 3, a short column, "HOA schedules special session on safety." Underneath, someone had written in pen across the margin, same hand as the post office board, same weight of irritation. Show the plat. A man at the counter swiveled on his stool. He had the look of a neighbor who'd watched enough meetings to think he understood all of them. You know, he said, big trucks and kids don't mix. Neither do fake maps and real land, I said. He considered that, turned back to his eggs. The bell over the door jangled. A talk show host from the AM station slid into the booth behind us with a portable recorder and too much cologne. He nodded our way. "Mr. Carter," he said, "care to speak on the record ahead of the hearing?" "Not today," I said. "Viewers love a good fight." "We're not fighting," I answered. "We're verifying." Ellie nudged my boot under the table, a small reminder not to swing at bait. Lane lifted his mug. "You'll get better tape at the clubhouse," he told the host. "They have a projector and everything." "Projectors hum," the host said, clicking his recorder off. "Radio loves a hum." Ellie spread documents across the formica and began her ritual date in the right corner exhibit tag and the left cross-reference in the margin. "Exhibit A, 1974 plat," she said. "Exhibit B, 1989, retirement roll. Exhibit C, Partial 12-07, notice. Exhibit D, work order." I pointed to the blue dot on the overlay. "Anchor that to the survey photo with Dad." I said. Same corner, same oak in the background. She found the old print yellow-white around the edges. "Got it," she said, placing it under the acetate. The oak's limb matched the angle of our fence rail like a hinge line waiting for its pin. Lane leaned in. "What about jurisdiction? They'll say community standards until the ceiling peels. Standards don't cross recorded lines," I said. "When the plat says, stop, you stop." The waitress slid a stack of printed agendas onto our table. "Here," she said. They added child safety to the bullet points. Ellie skimmed, then raised one eyebrow. "Ingress control dust mitigation vehicular risk," she read. "No parcel numbers, no citations." "Because the parcel they need died in 1989, I said. A shadow fell across our booth. It was the man from the counter again, softer this time. "I'm not against farms," he said. "I just don't want kids hurt." "Neither do I said. "I raised mine on this ground." He looked at Ellie, then at the blue dot on the map. "That your corner it is," I said. He nodded and walked out, hat in his hands. We paid the check and carried our paper into the noon glare. Heat rose off the blacktop. Ellie set the folder on the truck bed and took a slow breath. "Say it," she told me. "Say what?" "What we actually saw this morning. We saw a board pretending fog is a fence," I said. "We saw a work order signed with a ghost." She smiled without humor. "Good line. It's not a line I said. It's a fact." At the post office board, the same flyer hung in the same neat staples, HOA Community Safety Initiative. Fresh red ink had joined the margin chorus, "Show the plat." Someone else added, or "Show the vote." Ellie took a photo of the handwriting and the staples close enough to count the barbs. The AM host pulled up again, idled at the curb. "You'll come on tonight if the board ducks questions?" he asked. "If the truth needs air," I said, "we'll give it some." He tapped his dash. "I'll save you a segment." Back at the truck, Ellie stacked the exhibits in order and slid them into the binder. "Exhibit A through D," she said. "One set for the clerk, one for the board, one for us. Add a fourth," I said, "for whoever on that board still believes in neighbors." She tucked an extra copy behind the cover. I looked down Main Street, the barber pole turning the bank clock blinking noon. A gust of hot air lifting the flag in front of the courthouse, and felt the slow, cool center that comes when rage hardens into resolve. "They say it's about safety," Ellie said. I closed the binder and clicked the rings shut like a lock. They're not protecting kids. They're protecting a narrative. The diner smelled like barbecue smoke and fried onions. The lunch rush hadn't hit yet, but voices bounced off the tile floor like loose coins. Grace Holloway slid into the booth across from me, crisp white blouse sleeves, rolled up silver pen in her hand. "You brought the receipts." I pushed the folder across the table, enough to make them choke. She opened it slowly, scanning with the focus of a surgeon. Plat, map, retirement roll. Work order, notice, agenda, printout. She glanced up. "You kept everything. Every bolt, Every page, every stamp, I said. Good. Grace flipped to the HOA notice and underlined 4/12 to 07. You realize this section doesn't exist in their filed bylaws? Ellie leaned forward. Then, what are they enforcing? Grace smirked. A ghost clause. No vote, no minutes, no county record. That means the board invoked authority it doesn't have. The waitress refilled our cups, curious but quiet. Grace waited until she left, then continued, voice low and sure. You're not in violation, Cole. They are. I felt the muscles in my neck ease just a little. So, what's next? Paper trail? Grace said. We build what's called a chain of authority. We'll demand proof of who proposed Arthur 12-07, who seconded who signed the spending authorizations. If any link is missing, the entire enforcement collapses. Ellie slid her tablet across the table. I can cross-check county filings. Do it, Grace said. The board's contractor Clearbrook Access Management is registered under a different address, one tied to the vice president's husband. That's conflict of interest. The bank funding their improvement loan won't like that. Lane appeared easing into the next booth with the air of a man pretending not to listen. He was my insurance against surprises. Grace noticed him but said nothing. At the counter, a man stirred his coffee far too long, wrist tilted toward us. The small red blink on his pen caught the light. Grace noticed that too. They've sent someone to record, she whispered. Let him. Truth doesn't fear tape. I chuckled. He might get bored. She smiled. Then we'll bore him with facts. Grace tapped the folder again. You have your father's deed? I pulled out the faded document. Stamped in 1974. Witnessed by county registrar. The fence line's marked here. She nodded. That line is your spine. Don't let them convince you it's soft. Ellie unrolled the overlay map and smoothed it flat. See this blue mark? Their buffer stops 71 feet short. Our fence is exactly on the deed line, Perfect Grace said. Visual proof. Juries love simple math. The waitress set down a small plate of cornbread. Grace glanced at it. Add this receipt to your evidence, she said with half a grin. Shows time, date, witness, and state of mind. State of mind? Ellie asked. Calm, Grace said. That's what juries remember. The TV switched to local news footage, an image of the clubhouse, the flagpole, and a caption reading, Community Safety Meeting Tonight. Grace gestured at the screen. They're building a narrative. They say it's about safety, but safety is the bait. The real target is control. They're calling it an improvement project, I said. Which means money, she replied. If they used assessment funds for unauthorized construction, we trigger a financial freeze. Banks despise risk. Once we file, their credit line goes dark. Ellie blinked. That fast quicker, Grace said. Bylaw violations violate trust covenants. One letter to the lender, and everything halts until audit. The man with the blinking pen shifted closer. Lane cleared his throat. You got something to say, friend? The man smiled, folded the pen into his pocket, and walked out without a word. Grace leaned back. There's always one, she said. The HOA's not worried about your fence. They're worried about precedent. If you prove the plat rules, everyone else will question the board. I rubbed a thumb along the edge of the folder. Then we make it public. Grace nodded. But legally. We file a confirmation of hearing and demand full public comment under the Sunshine Statute. Once stamped, they can't move the time again. Let's do it, Ellie said. We finished our coffee and headed for the clerk's office. The air smelled like copier toner and floor wax. Grace filled out the form with deliberate strokes. Request minutes, ballot, and authority for 812-07. Confirmation of agenda time. Disclosure of expenditures to Clearbrook Access Management, LLC. The clerk stamped it with a hard thud. Received 12:32. The ink spread like blood into the fibers. Grace smiled for the first time that day. Now they're bound by their own record. The clerk tilted her head. You folks stirring trouble. Grace slid the copy back into the folder. Just sweeping cobwebs. Outside, the sun hit the courthouse steps, sharp and white. The AM talk show host waved from across the street. Cole. 1. Quick quote before air. I shook my head. Not today. People love a good fight, he called. I looked at Grace. We're not fighting, I said. We're documenting. She nodded once. The board runs on noise. We'll run on paper. We crossed toward the truck. Ellie carried the folder like something fragile and powerful. The courthouse bell struck 12:45. Grace stopped beside the curb. They'll push back, she said. I met her eyes. Then she smiled, the kind that doesn't soften anything. Then we pushed the record. The projector hummed above us a low electric purr that vibrated through the annex walls. On the pull-down screen, the minutes glowed white and grainy. Then the gap appeared one clean, empty line where a vote should have been. No motion, no approval, no signature. Grace tilted her head, lips curving into a thin smile. Missing words are still evidence, she said. The treasurer of the HOA. Gregory Buchanan shifted behind the folding table. Sweat darkened the fabric under his collar. Those records were transferred, he muttered. To where Grace asked. He blinked. Archived. Show the transfer log. He fumbled with a thumb drive. The projector flickered, then displayed an email chain dated 2 months before the fence order. The subject line, Bridge Loan Terms. Clearbrook Access Management. Grace's pen froze mid-note. Bridge loan. Gregory swallowed. It's a standard funding bridge temporary draw. Ellie leaned close to the screen. Authorized by who? The treasurer adjusted his glasses. By the board. Grace tapped Orshon Twut 07 on the printed agenda in front of her. The section that doesn't exist. A ripple of laughter rose from the back row. 2 residents leaned in, whispering to each other. One of them whispered, "He's cooked." I kept my voice level. "Mr. Buchanan, did the bank require signatures from all officers?" He hesitated. "Normally, yes." Grace spread a document on the table, the one we'd found tucked between the plat maps. "Exhibit B," she said. The projector light caught the letterhead Clearbrook National Bank, servicing letter. A single name appeared on the bottom line, Gregory Buchanan, authorized officer. No cosigner, no witness. Grace's tone was almost gentle. You signed for a $500,000 encumbrance with one signature, on a clause that doesn't legally exist. The treasurer's mouth opened, closed, opened again. It's procedural. Procedures don't erase bylaws, Grace said. The residents stirred papers rustling like wind in dry leaves. I could hear the chlorine-scented air from the janitor's mop in the hall. Sharp, sterile, the smell of false cleanliness. Gregory fumbled with the remote. Let's move on to community improvements. No, Grace said, calm as a gavel. We stay right here. She wrote 3 words on a notepad. Read into record. Then she looked at me. Cole, will you do the honors? I nodded, stepped to the microphone, and unfolded the letter. This document, I said, voice-steady records an unauthorized encumbrance against community assets. It bears one signature only, no quorum, no witness, no vote. The treasurer wiped his temple with a trembling handkerchief. That's not? Grace cut him off. It's exactly that. You've created personal liability, Mr. Buchanan. The bridge loan's collateral clause binds you, not the homeowners. The projector flickered again. A red notice flashed, file not found. Someone at the back muttered, Of course. Ellie lifted her phone and snapped a photo of the frozen screen. Got it, she said. Gregory turned toward the chairperson's seat, but it was empty. The rest of the board had already started to slip away. One door hinge groaned open, then shut. Grace turned to the small audience. You all have a right to see the ledger, she said. It's your dues, your money, your vote. A woman in a sun visor raised a trembling hand. Can they fix this? Grace shook her head. They can only face it. Gregory tried again, quieter this time. The funds are earmarked for security, I said. You mean the gate that was supposed to keep us safe? The one they built after tearing down my fence. His face tightened the way guilt sometimes looks like irritation. Grace flipped another page. Clause 7. Disbursement upon completion of improvement verified by inspection. Did that inspection happen? He didn't answer, because she continued. There's no record filed, no invoice, no county certification. The money left the account, but it never came home. Ellie whispered, They spent it off the books. Grace nodded. And that dear treasurer is embezzlement in slow motion. The silence stretched thick and metallic. Even the projector's hum seemed to grow louder. One of the residents whispered, I knew something stank after they raised dues. Grace clicked her pen shut. We'll file this with the state attorney's office, attach the servicing letter and your admission today. It'll read as a procedural irregularity if you cooperate. Gregory's eyes darted between the light and the screen and the people he used to command. You can't just... Yes, Grace said. We can. And we just did. The clerk at the back, a woman with a badge from the town hall, scribbled something on a pad and whispered into her phone, probably not to her husband. Ellie slipped the letter back into the folder and labeled it Exhibit B, Servicing Letter. Her handwriting was calm, deliberate. Grace gathered the stack of papers and looked at me. Now we have our second line of attack, she said quietly. They can't move a dollar until this is resolved. Double front, I said. Legal and financial. Exactly. We walked out into the slanted afternoon light. The courthouse clock read 4:12. The air smelled like hot pavement and chlorine from the fountain filter. Behind us, the annex windows reflected the empty projection screen, the white gap still glowing. Ellie adjusted her bag. What now? Grace looked toward the upcoming hearing notice posted on the bulletin board. Now, she said, we bring the record to the people they tried to fool. A low murmur rose from the hallway residents, calling others' voices, gathering momentum. I took one last look through the window at the projector's glow fading on the wall. If they want a crowd, I said, we'll bring a record. The clubhouse patio was packed, the flag snapping above the roofline, cameras nodding on tripods. Light went honey gold that thin hour when shadows get long. Marlene stepped to the microphone, smiling with every tooth. We value civility, she said. Beside me, Grace checked her watch. 17:40, she murmured. Keep them honest. Ellie hugged the binder. Gregory stood at the rail, glancing at his phone. The bank's blue logo washed his face. A folding table was our stage 2, flags a stack of agendas, 3 pitchers of warm water. Residents lined the perimeter with lawn chairs. The local reporter framed his shot soundman, pressing a foam mic into the murmur. Marlene tapped the mic. We're here to ensure safety and harmony. Then, start with the map, Grace said, and walked into the light. She laid the 1974 plat, the retirement roll, and the minutes printout that carried a blank where a vote should live. This, she said, touching each, is ground you can't rewrite with a flyer. Marlene kept smiling. There are procedures, and we honor them, Grace said, by following them. Ellie snapped the overlay in place. The projector warmed. On the screen, the blue dot at the northwest corner, the deed line, and the HOA boundary stopping short. A murmur passed like wind across wheat. Gregory's thumb worked his phone. Sweat ringed his collar. The reporter zoomed. A man near the steps called WHO authorized Partarnutuv 07. Marlene's smile thinned. The board acts in good faith. Grace lifted the minutes, then read that faith into record. Show the vote. Silence. Paper rustled. Fine, Grace said. Next document. She held up the servicing letter on bank letterhead. One signature. No cosigner. No witness. A bridge loan tied to dues without quorum or recorded authority. She turned to the collateral clause and let the projector paint it large. That is a personal rope, Mr. Buchanan. Gregory tried for a laugh and missed. All improvements benefit families. Which families, I asked. The ones told. Fog is a fence. Please refrain from inflammatory language, Marlene said. Inflammatory would be claiming a vote that never happened, Grace replied, setting the letter beside the plat like two sides of a trap. Ellie stepped to public comment. Parcel ID in the notice was retired in 1989. The clerk certified that at 9:11 this morning. She held up stamped copies. The camera drank the ink. A woman in a visor lifted her hand. "Are our dues at risk?" "Yes," Grace said. "Until the board cures the breach or the bank stops the bleed." Another voice. "Then stop it." Gregory's phone buzzed. He read, blinked, tried to pocket the device without anyone seeing his hand shake. Grace's phone buzzed too. She glanced down, then raised her eyes. 1742. "What happened?" I asked. "Bank." "Hold on, the HOA line of credit pending review," she said, voice clear to the back fence. "No further disbursements." The patio reacted like one body exhaling. Some clapped, some cursed, some stared at the table the way people stare at an honest thing they've avoided. Marlene tried to resume. "Let's all remain calm." "We are calm," I said. Finally, someone fought back. The reporter's eyebrows rose, grateful for a sentence that would cut clean. The mic found my mouth. "We did it with documents," I added. Not shouting. Grace faced the board. "Bylaws, Fiatern 1207 does not exist in the filed record. The plat fixes the boundary. The minutes show no vote. The servicing letter shows one signature encumbering the community without authority. Effective now, the bank has frozen funds. We request immediate removal of the unlawful gate and a full accounting." Marlene's hand hovered above the gavel. She didn't strike. Gregory whispered something brittle. She kept not striking. Residents spoke over one another, the slow turn of a crowd into a verdict. The camera panned across faces, angry, relieved, confused, awake. Ellie folded the overlay and slid it into the binder. "We lock these when we get home," she said. "We will," I told her. "Tonight everything goes into the safe. At home." A boy tugged his mother's sleeve. "What did they do wrong? They forgot the rules apply to them too," she said. The sun slipped lower. The flag above us snapped once and settled. Phones lit the patio like a thin constellation. Grace closed the binder, snapped the rings, and met my eyes. By sunset, she said the money stopped moving. By morning, the presses had done their work. A stack of papers waited outside the diner door, ink still damp around the headline, "Accounts frozen pending review." Someone had circled it with a ballpoint and drawn an arrow toward the clubhouse photo as if truth needed help being noticed. Across the street, the bank lobby filled and emptied in Tides retirees with deposit slips, contractors in dusty boots, a mother balancing a stroller and a checkbook. Behind the glass, the receptionist smiled the way people do when they've been told to keep smiling. Ellie held the door while I wiped newsprint from my fingers. We didn't need to go inside, we just needed to be seen not going inside. "Quiet day to let paper talk," she said. "Best kind," I answered. Grace joined us at the curb, a manila envelope tucked under her arm. "Cease and desist addressed to the HOA and the shell company." Filed copy to the bank's compliance desk. We crossed to the cafe. The TV over the espresso machine ran the clip from last night, the patio, the flag, the moment Grace read the servicing letter into the microphone. On mute, the captions told the story, bylaws disputed. Funds frozen at 1742. A barista paused mid-pour. "You're the map guy," he said to me, and set down 3 mugs without asking what we wanted. Judith Kramer slipped in from the sidewalk, a tote bag against her hip like a shield. She looked smaller in daylight, or maybe lighter. She slid into the chair beside Ellie and lowered her voice. "She lied to us," Judith said, meaning Marlene. "Not just you, us. She said the vote was recorded and the bank had approved everything." We nodded and went home and baked for the fundraiser. Grace opened the envelope, laid a fresh letter on the table, and tapped the line that mattered. "Effective immediately. Clearbrook Access Management and its agents are ordered to desist from any further collection, expenditure, or representation of authority related to the gate or roadway improvements." She sealed a second copy. "This one's for the board's mailbox. The camera can watch me post it." Judith's eyes brimmed not with tears, more like anger that had finally found its target. "I wrote the minutes for years," she said. "I know what a quorum sounds like." This was theater. On the TV, the station cut to a split screen, an old photo of the subdivision ribbon cutting on the left, our projector image of the blank minutes on the right. The anchor said something you didn't need volume to translate. How does a blank line move money? Grace sipped her coffee and watched the door. They'll try a statement, she said. Words like unfortunate, misunderstanding, temporary. Don't answer it. We filed at 9:03. Compliance will reply before lunch. The banker's aide arrived in a neat suit the color of wet slate. He crossed the street carefully as if hot tar might ruin his shoes and found us by the TV glow. Ms. Holloway, compliance received your packet, he said. My manager asked me to provide this. He handed Grace a single sheet. It wore the bank's letterhead like armor, hold affirmed pending documentation review. No apology, no drama, just the quiet click of a larger gear. Thank you, Grace said. He hesitated. For what it's worth, my aunt lives on your road, he added, then flushed. I mean the road you cleared. She says it gets her to work on time. Tell her to drive it at noon, I said. Fair daylight for all. He smiled at that small and real, then left as carefully as he'd come. A reporter stepped through the cafe door with the caution of someone who'd been shouted out of rooms before. He asked first, which I respected. Do you have a minute for the noon segment? Grace shook her head. We've said enough for this morning. He shifted aim toward me. Mr. Carter, are you happy? I looked at the headline again, at the circled arrow some stranger had drawn at the video loop of our town learning how authority works. No, I said. I'm not happy. I'm right. He stood with that a beat longer than most would, then nodded. That'll do. Judith touched my sleeve. They're calling for a special meeting, she said. Residents only. Tonight. Good Grace answered. Neighbors should talk without a stage. We'll deliver documents, then stand back. We walked the envelope to the clubhouse together, the four of us moving slow so it wouldn't look like a march. The porch boards creaked. A camera in the eave blinked a red light as if confessing it had always been there. Grace slipped the cease and desist into the brass slot and held it in place a moment, palm flat like a blessing withheld. Back at the cafe, the barista flipped the channel to weather as if the sky might argue with what had already changed. Outside, the bank door opened and closed and opened again. Business continued, but narrower now, like a river after a dam. Ellie lifted her mug. So, we wait, she said. We wait, Grace agreed. Silence isn't surrender, it's a filed motion. The reporter left us with a nod. Judith folded her hands. The TV showed a radar map nobody cared about, not today. I watched the reflection of Main Street in the glass, the barber pole turning the flag on the courthouse catching a noon breeze, and thought about how long it takes for a story to admit it's wrong. Truth doesn't rush, but it always arrives on time. The clerk pressed the seal into the page, the sound sharp in the quiet courtroom. Case 24-197. Carter versus Clearbrook Homeowners Association, she read. The metal stamp left a wet circle ink bleeding into the paper like a slow sunrise. Fluorescent lights hummed above the benches. The air smelled of varnish toner and nerves. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Grace Holloway, my attorney, and Ellie, my daughter. Behind us, half the town had come, neighbors in their Sunday clothes on a weekday morning, whispering as if this place could still decide what was fair. Across the aisle, Gregory Buchanan stood alone. No Marlene, no counsel, just a black briefcase and a collar that had already wilted under the heat of his own conscience. The judge entered a woman with gray hair pulled tight and eyes that measured truth like inches on a blueprint. We rose. She gave a curt nod and took her seat. Appearances for the record, she said. Plaintiff, Cole Carter. With counsel, Grace Holloway. Grace answered. Defendant Gregory cleared his throat. Gregory Buchanan appearing on behalf of the Clearbrook HOA. No attorney, he shook his head. No, Your Honor. The judge made a note. Very well. Proceed. Grace stood, her voice even confident. Your Honor, this case concerns the unlawful removal of private property and misuse of HOA funds under a bylaw section 412-07 that does not legally exist. She placed 3 clear sleeves on the bench. Exhibit A. The original deed recorded 1974, showing boundary ownership by the plaintiff. Exhibit B. The 1989 parcel retirement roll proving the HOA's cited parcel ID was voided. Exhibit C. The HOA minutes showing no vote authorizing enforcement or financial encumbrance under Pater 12-07. The clerk passed them forward. The judge read page by page, her brow tightening. "Mr. Buchanan," she said, "do these minutes reflect a vote?" He swallowed. Some files were transferred temporarily misplaced. Misplaced or non-existent? He blinked. Misplaced? Your Honor. Grace's tone stayed calm. If they existed, Your Honor, the county would have a record. It does not. The amendment was never filed, never voted on, and never recorded. The judge turned another page. Continue. Grace lifted a single letter from her folder. Exhibit D. Servicing letter from Clearbrook National Bank. Signed solely by Mr. Buchanan for a bridge loan secured with HOA assessments. No co-signature, no member approval. Funds were used for a safety improvement, a gate constructed after destroying Mr. Carter's lawful fence. A ripple ran through the gallery. Someone whispered, "There it is." Gregory's hands trembled. We acted in good faith. Grace didn't raise her voice. Good faith doesn't balance an illegal check. The judge gestured toward me. "Mr. Carter, your fence, was it built on your deeded line?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. "Verified by county plat, confirmed again last week." Was there notice before removal? I reached for the envelope I'd carried for months. Filed notice received at 0317, stamped without cause. I recorded video of the removal and submitted it as part of Exhibit C. The judge nodded once. Accepted. Grace continued, turning toward the screen. "If the court allows visual exhibit." The clerk dimmed the lights. The projector hummed, washing the courtroom wall with the image Ellie had prepared a plat overlay in blue and black showing the property line and the false buffer. "This," Grace said, "is the real record. Land doesn't move because someone prints a flyer." The judge leaned forward. "The court accepts the overlay into evidence." She faced Gregory again. "Why sign a loan with one signature?" He tried to explain, words stumbling like bad steps. "The president authorized verbally." "Verbal authority doesn't amend bylaws," the judge said. "You created debt without consent. The funds are now frozen. Do you dispute that Gregory's shoulders fell?" "No, Your Honor." The judge closed the file slowly. "Then the facts are clear." Grace stepped back from the table, folding her hands. "We ask for remedy as filed restoration of the fence to its surveyed boundary. Repayment of diverted funds and injunction against further collection tied to the unlawful loan." The judge was silent for a long moment. The clock on the back wall ticked. Every sound seemed to hang, waiting. Finally, she spoke. Findings to be read into record. The clerk began, her voice steady. "The court finds that HOA Section Pater 12-07 is not present in recorded bylaws, that no meeting minutes reflect a lawful vote, that funds were advanced without authorization, and that the plaintiff's property was altered without due process." The judge picked up her gavel. "Clearbrook, HOA is ordered to restore the fence at its own expense within 72 hours, refund all misused funds to the community account, and cease further assessment collection related to the bridge loan. The servicing letter will be forwarded to state review." The gavel struck once clean final. The sound rippled through the room. Gregory sat down hard, the fight gone from his posture. Behind us, someone whispered, "It's over." The judge looked toward me. "Mr. Carter, any closing words for the record?" I stood. "Only thanks," I said. "For reminding them, paperwork cuts both ways." She gave a single nod. "This court is adjourned." As we stepped out into the hallway, the light outside was pale and sharp like a new page waiting for ink. Ellie hooked her arm through mine. "We did it, Dad." Grace smiled faintly. "By the book," she said. I looked back once at the courtroom door, now closed, seal still drying on the order. The sound of neighbors' voices drifted behind us, soft, relieved alive. Finally, someone fought back by the book. The county trucks arrived just as the sky turned the color of copper. Their yellow lights flashed slow and steady down the gravel road, kicking up a trail of dust that caught the dying sun. I stepped off the porch court order, folded in my palm, the ink still smelling faintly of fresh authority. The foreman climbed down from the lead truck. His vest gleamed, his voice plain. "You Mr. Carter, I am." He nodded once. "Got your order right here. Says we fix what shouldn't have been touched." He looked out toward the open field where my fence used to stand. "We'll set it right." Ellie stood by the oak tree, camera in hand, filming in silence. Lane leaned on the tailgate of his pickup, arms crossed, that faint grin he wore when the world finally caught up to common sense. The air smelled of pine and wet soil. The grass underfoot still held heat from the afternoon, and the breeze came easy as if the land itself was exhaling. The workers unloaded tools, post diggers, hammers, a roll of wire, and a coil of measuring line. The first thud of a post hitting the ground echoed sharp and certain. Another followed. The sound found a rhythm, work replacing argument motion, replacing months of noise. I handed the order back to the foreman. "Make sure they follow the original deed line. Corners marked at the oak." He tipped his cap. "We'll measure twice." The sun slid lower, painting long shadows across the field. Ellie crouched for a shot of the first rail sliding into place. Her phone captured the sound, the tap, the rasp, the creak, as if the ground itself was remembering how to hold again. My phone buzzed. A message from Grace. "Complied. Fehard 12, 07, 18, 20. Short, clean, final." I showed it to Ellie. She grinned, a tired, proud kind of smile. "They signed off." "They did," I said, "by the book." The last of the posts went in straight as candle wicks. The workers moved without hurry, all focus. A few neighbors had gathered at the far side of the road, hands tucked in pockets, watching history unwind. Someone started a live stream. Others just stood quiet the way people do at a graveside or a church, witnessing something worth their stillness. One of the crew called out corner square. The foreman checked the line, then turned to me. "She's true." I nodded. It always was. Ellie lowered the camera and whispered, "Looks better than before." "That's what happens," I said, "when you build it on record." She smirked. Grace texted me too. Says the county clerk asked for a copy of the live stream. "Let her have it," I said. "Proof belongs to everyone now." The foreman clapped the dust from his gloves and motioned for one last piece, a small cedar plaque Ellie had made that morning. She handed it to him, neat black letters burned into the grain, simple and final. He squinted at it. "Boundary restored, 2024. He read aloud. "Nice touch." He planted the stake into the earth near the third post, the same place my father had once stood, hand resting on the rail for the first fence. He gave it 3 firm taps. The plaque caught the light, glowing faintly as the sun hit the horizon. For a breath, no one moved. Then, from the road, the small crowd began to clap, slow at first, then louder. Not a cheer, not a shout, just gratitude with sound. Ellie turned the camera back toward the field. "They're still watching," she said softly. "Let them," I replied. "Truth deserves daylight." The trucks idled, then turned back toward town. The sound faded, replaced by crickets and the steady creak of wood settling in its new home. Lane slapped my shoulder. "Hell of a sight," he said. "It's just a fence," I told him. He smiled. "Not anymore." I looked at the line stretching across the property, clean, straight, proud. The rails shone faintly in the orange light, each one catching fire for a second before dusk swallowed it whole. Ellie packed up her gear. "What'll you call it?" I ran a palm along the top rail. The wood was warm, smooth, alive again. "The line that held," I said. She filmed one last frame, the plaque, the fence, the sky, bleeding gold. Finally, someone fought back. She whispered the phrase that had followed us all summer. I nodded, and did it right. We walked toward the porch as the sun fell behind the trees. The fence stood quiet, proud, and true proof that sometimes the smallest victories echo the longest. The seal on the court order still shone faintly when I pinned it beside the cedar plaque, "Boundary restored, 2024. The last rays hit the rail, the wood glowing like it remembered every blow that set it right. Neighbors stood in silence, hats low, the sound of the flag and a single hammer echoing across the field. It wasn't revenge, only repair proof that due process still worked if you stood steady enough to use it. Justice isn't loud, it's steady. Finally, someone fought back. Share your HOA story below your map might help someone redraw theirs.